Welcome to SF Commercial Property Conversations with Bruce Bean, where Bay Area investments meet expert insights. Get ready to unlock the strategies of commercial real estate success.
So it's my great pleasure to be talking with Eugene Dilan today. It looks like it's spelled Dylan, or that's how I wanted to pronounce it, but Eugene corrected me and said it's Dilan. So Eugene, great to have you on the San Francisco Commercial Properties Conversation podcast. That's a mouthful, but I hope that you will give us a little background on who you are and where you came from.
Okay, well, great. Thank you for having me on, Bruce. A little bit about my background. I grew up in Brooklyn in a little neighborhood called the East New York that most people don't know. When we first moved in, I was about 2 or 3, and it was a lovely little neighborhood. And over time, it became the hood, literally the hood. There was white flight, and people left. And by the time I left for college, there were abandoned buildings and not very safe. And I think my family stayed there for a little while after I left for college and eventually moved to a couple of other places. I am a first generation New York Rican is what I call myself. Parents are from Puerto Rico. I grew up very humble beginnings. My father was a handyman with a 6th grade education. My mother took care of children in the house, had a high school diploma, and I have a doctorate, and that is the story of the American dream. In that they moved to New York to find a better life, and all of their kids are professionals in one way or another. I again grew up in New York, went to school in New Jersey, got my doctorate here in California, but did an APA internship in DC.
So how many siblings do you have?
So that's an interesting story, Bruce, in that technically I have 4, but technically I also have 6. And so I grew up with my big brother and sister from my mom's first marriage. And then my parents had 3 together. So technically there's 5 there. But my father also had 2 kids from his first marriage, which I didn't grow up with. And so I don't really know them very well. I know of them, but I don't know them very well. And so technically there's 7.
Well, that's a fun family. That's a
Yes.
fun kind of a Americanized group that's been put together, so to speak, in New York and then out here into California. So how did you get from college out to California?
So after my master's, I moved to Basel, Switzerland, where I lived there for about a year and a half, on and off. And I wasn't really supposed to work because I was an expat, but I worked with a lot of American women who were having culture shock. I used my master's degree in counseling and made a little money there and traveled around Europe. And then following the ending of a relationship, I got on a plane, I moved to San Francisco, and that was 31, 32 years ago.
And lived in San Francisco happily ever after, although that you told me earlier that you moved out of San Francisco and now you're living up in Sebastopol on
That's right.
Freight.
Yeah. 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 So I lived in San Francisco for about 30 years, got my doctorate there, worked full time through all of my degrees, not just my doctorate. My background was in nonprofit management, and I had a small psychotherapy practice in Hayes Valley. Somewhere along the way, I realized that I really loved going into an organization and fixing systems and building teams. And I had an aha moment, and voila, now I've been in consulting almost 30 years, because I pivoted. I joined a British consulting firm and consulted mostly to the defense, nuclear, and aerospace industry. Worked in Baghdad, Kabul, and Kandahar during the Iraq
Oh my
War.
gosh. Oh wow.
Um, Flew in on military craft and some private craft as well. That was an interesting experience, to say the least. Learned a lot. And then how many years? 14 years ago, I decided it was time to go out on my own, and that's when I started the DILAN Consulting Group.
And so that kind of leads us into real estate. You actually moved and had very successful move of moving out of San Francisco, and you uh, talk about the whole issue in real estate is basically building trust. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that. I suspect our clientele, our audience will be very interested to hear how you build trust.
Yeah, there's many theories around how you build trust. And some of us are the kind of people who just trust everybody and then you can lose the trust. But some people really need to, I think, over time, develop trust. And there's actually a lot of formulas. One of them speaks to the concept of me versus other oriented. If you are a very me oriented person, then I'm probably going to think that you're not going to consider my needs when you're making decisions or making choices. So that's number one of the factors. Another one of the factors is past behavior. Your past behavior is going to tell me whether or not I can trust you to follow through on your commitments or not, for example. Another one of the factors around trust is, do you actually have the skill set to do what you said you were going to do? Because if you don't, then why would I trust you if I don't genuinely believe that you have the skill set? And there's another factor in here, I can't quite remember the word for it, but it really comes down to having, I think, almost like the disposition. So I'll give you an example. I have a couple of friends that I absolutely love, would give them the key to the house, would trust them with the car, but they're just not dog people. So I would not trust them with the dog. And,
Right.
and so I can't quite remember what the word is for that, but I just know that they just don't quite get it. So again, there's many ways to think about trust. But those are four factors. But I also think the time for some people, and so the example of trust in real estate, as I mentioned before, Linda LeBlanc, who I think is with Compass, she was a friend, and for 30 years or so, a relationship as a friend. But when we bought our property in San Francisco some 18, 19 years ago, she immediately said, when you're ready, I'm going to sell it. And she continued to cultivate and maintain the relationship. And it wasn't just, I need something from you. She genuinely, was someone who remembered birthdays. She was someone who would leave flowers at the door. So when the time finally came for us to sell, A, we have a long-term relationship, and B, here's someone who had been very kind to us. And so the trust just kind of was there already. And so when she said, I need A, B, C, and D, to make this happen, we said, okay. And at the end of the day, as I said before, she got us substantially over asking and more than doubled what we bought our property for. So she's a great real estate agent, but B, she cultivated the relationship. We started off on a good place, but she worked really hard to maintain it.
I think that's an interesting distinction between sort of a real estate agent that is just sort of pandering to you, like, okay, I'm going to do this, but they're not really very genuine about it. So I think that's a key factor that a lot of people don't really understand, that cultivation isn't just sort of pandering or doing the right thing. It's actually having that connection with people and understanding that trust is built through that very connection, that real connection between people.
Yeah, I think to what you're saying, you have to move beyond the transaction. And so
Right.
it's been more than 2 years since we sold our property. We still get emails from Linda say, would you like some ball tickets?
Yeah.
It wasn't, the deed is done and see you. It was, hey, this is a relationship like any other relationship. And, when we were looking for an agent to buy our property up here in Sebastopol, we got a referral, and we met the guy and we liked him. But when we put an offer into place, we didn't feel he had the chops at the end of the day. And so we decided that we didn't trust him to continue being our agent because we didn't feel he showed up in the way that he could have. I won't say his name because he was starting in the field, and so I want to be respectful. But we found another agent up here who really knew the area. Someone that when we bought the property and we said, we need a plumber, she said, I know a guy. When I said, I need a painter, I know a guy. Someone who's so embedded in the community that she has trusted vendors that she could refer to us. And so again, there was an element of trust there, and she had done a transaction for some friends of ours. And so again, it just shifted the dynamic. And she was also very patient because we looked at a lot of properties. And Kate Amalfi, she just hung in there with us until we were ready to pull the trigger.
Well, and I think that's critical to the whole real estate world, is that a lot of times it's not just the transaction. Anybody can kind of, put together a transaction and make it work regardless of how much experience they have. But to really kind of bring that extra value to the customer is critical to any transaction in real estate or otherwise.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure you find this in your consulting business.
That's right. So our trademark is business is human.
Mm.
And what that fundamentally means is that it is about relationships. It is about people being the secret sauce that can make or break any organization. You can have all the budget in the world that you need to buy the best equipment and pay the biggest salaries. But if ultimately people aren't working together, you're not going to execute. And so it really does come down to how, as a leader, you role model the behaviors that you want to see in others, how you, as a leader, reward the behaviors that you want to see in others. Because so often organizations will say, we're all about teamwork. But when it comes to incentives, they're only incentivizing individual heroics. And so they're sending a confusing message. It's not just about closing the deal, it's about what's best for the customer and doing what's best for the organization. And so I think a lot of organizations, again, don't get the culture and the values part right. In fact, most organizations don't even have values. And if they do have values, they live on the website and nobody can even tell you what they are. And so again, when you're trying to build a practice, whether it's a consulting practice or a real estate practice, it really does come down to recognizing that the individual behaviors of the leaders shape the group norms and ultimately shape the culture of the organization. And if that group leader is seen to be selfish or someone who acts out in any kind of a way, it creates a norm in the group that that's how you make things happen around here. And so it really does come down to, again, bringing some mindfulness and recognizing that everything that you do, conscious or unconscious, is going to shape the culture of that organization.
Well, I think that's so critical in real estate. I mean, whether you're a real estate developer or you're a real estate agent or whatever facet you're in real estate, there's so much attention on, getting the transaction. Who did the biggest transaction? Who did the most transactions? Who's making the most money kind of approach. And I think that is very detrimental to the long-term effect of actually doing the real estate. If you're in the property management business, you want to manage the apartments or whatever you're working with and dealing with the people in a very humane way. So I think that's very critical to the whole part of real estate that I'm involved in.
Bruce, in some ways that might speak to a little bit of a scarcity mindset.
Mm.
Somehow, like, I have to take and protect this because there's not enough. And
Right.
I think what I have seen, and I know a lot of real estate agents personally, friends,
Yeah.
um, and again, we chose Linda despite the fact that we have so many other friends for a reason. But my point is that I have seen a lot of people who go into the industry of real estate and struggle, and they struggle because I think sometimes people don't pay them on time. Sometimes the agreements aren't explicit in terms of how people earn money. My personal opinion is that there's been some exploitation in the industry around new people who enter the real estate industry. And I think that there's an opportunity to codify a better way to onboard people and bring them along and develop them. And to me, sometimes it feels a little bit exploitive when new people enter that industry.
No, I think that's true. And it's a very difficult industry to actually get into. I don't know what the percentage is of the people that get in and then drop out, but I think it's very high. And part of that is that it's just one, you've got to get that flywheel, so to speak, going of all the customers that you're going to do, and you're getting paid by commission only generally. And so it's a kind of dog eat dog world out there,
Right.
and can be very difficult for some people to, they have great expectations and they think they can do it, but they have to basically survive for 1 or 2 years with very little or low income, and then
Right.
finally build up their value. I mean, I suspect even in your business, when you went out on your own, you had to kind of build up your own clientele and so forth. So
Yeah,
very,
absolutely. I had a do not compete, which was not valid in California, but
oh,
it was valid in Virginia, where my office was, even though I lived here, and so I had to respect that. But again, I think that being a consultant or an agent or anybody who is out there, you have to develop your skills, and at the same time, one of the skills that you have to develop is how to develop business. Most people, regardless of their training, weren't specifically trained in sales. And so I
oh,
think that those people who have a sales or marketing background sometimes I think have a better edge in the real estate industry, because I think they come in maybe knowing what the expectations are and knowing that you really have to hustle and you have to build relationships. One of the things I did was that I got certified in HR, even though I have a license in psychology, because HR people are basically the gatekeepers that hire consultants. And so
oh,
I joined that community. And so right now I'm in Sonoma, and we're helping to start a gay, lesbian, transgender, um, plus a business association. So again, because one of the ways that you can begin to get to know the community and build relationships is through service. And I think that sometimes people don't realize that you know there's only so many coffees or glasses of wine that you can have. Uh, and so you have to be more creative. And I have another friend who is in real estate, and she started, and you may know of her, the Doodle Group, and they meet in the Presidio, and there are now hundreds of doodles that meet up there a couple of times a month. And Janine is a real estate agent, but
yeah, yeah.
she's created a community, and so you have to find a way to build community that isn't just about coffee and a glass of wine. It needs to extend beyond that. And again, I believe doing service, having service as an element of it, I think also goes a long way, because when you're doing service, I think you hang out with people elbow to elbow, and you really do get to know them at a different level.
Well, speaking of which, you have the social engineering project. Is that the project you're talking about, or is that a different one?
So the social engineering project is a board that I just joined, and it's out of Oakland. I met Kevin at a conference about 3 years ago, and he basically, and there's a whole bunch of other people involved who are on the board, but Kevin is the organizational leader, the executive director. He's done a great job at building partnerships with Google and Microsoft and other companies, and they give access to the groups that Kevin brings in, these kids from Oakland and the Bay Area, who are brown and black kids, and kind of helping them to, I think, learn about STEM careers. And I recently wrote on LinkedIn for myself that as a child who didn't have a lot of access to things outside of my neighborhood, a lot of teachers, took an interest and exposed me. They took me into Manhattan and saw shows, and we went out to nice dinners. And my point is that young people can be helped by being exposed to things beyond what they would see otherwise. And so I think it's a great organization, and I encourage everyone to go to the website, the Social Engineering Project, and donate some money. But so that's one thing. But I'm starting a business association that's separate. And I'm one of the founders of that. And then I'm soon going to launch another nonprofit.
Wow, wow, you are rolling. So what's the Forbes Coaching Council?
So the Forbes Coaching Council is kind of like it's almost like an association that I belong to. It's a group that's by invitation for people that have an expertise in the area of coaching, and they give me a platform for writing blogs, for getting quotes into their publications, and so yeah, it's that's mostly what it is. It's not really more than that. I think some people really use it as a support group, but I have my own team as a support group. So I think a lot of individual executives, coaches probably find it really helpful in that it gives them a network to lean on.
So you speak German and Italian. So where did that come from?
Well, I think having grown up speaking two languages already,
Spanish.
Spanish, and I also studied it because at home I didn't learn how to write it. I've developed an ear, and so I lived in Switzerland und ich habe viele Deutsch gelernt auf dem Straße mit den Leuten. You know, if you want to buy milk, you better learn how to say it. You know, and so I learned a lot just by interacting with people during the time that I was there. And so I wouldn't say that I have a very sophisticated German, but I have enough to get around and find my way and order and those kinds of things. And more recently, when I went to Japan about 3 or 4 years ago, I studied 6 months of basic Japanese, so I could, you know, watashi no namae wa Eugene desu, genki desu ka, tore wa doko desu ka, and you know, all the where's the bathroom, and you know, all the basics, what directions, and so I try to do that whenever I go to any country. But the German was because I live there. Italian just because what's wrong with Italy? Nothing. Food, fashion. You know, it's just a beautiful place. Wine. It's like everybody should know Italian. It's literally one of my favorite places next to Greece.
That's fantastic. Well, so this is fantastic. This has been a great conversation. So how will people get a hold of you if they want to reach you?
So they can connect with me on LinkedIn. They can go to my website, DILANconsulting.com. They can find me on Forbes. You can just Google my name and every option to connect with me will come up.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you for taking time to talk with us, and I look forward to seeing you in the future.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
That's a wrap on today's journey through the SF commercial real estate scene. Ready to share your story? Visit sfcommercialconversations.com/guest. Your insights could lead the next conversation.